Hello, please. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. The first question we have is from Wayne Crosby, and this is regarding what took place after these murders occurred. Now, paraphrasing his question here, basically what he's asking is that Darren Nichols states in his testimony that after these murders were committed, he called up a friend and went to the pub, drank a severe amount of drink, and then went home. But have we ever heard from this friend who is supposed to have been in the pub with after these murders? And we do. This isn't a statement that I've read out on the channel before, to the best of my knowledge. So what I'll do for you now is read out this very statement from Ricky Snell, the man who Darren Nichols claims he went to see after these murders had taken place. The following police statement is from Ricky Snell, dated the 20th of May 1996. I have lived in the Braintree area for the past 20 years. In that time I've made a number of friends and associates in the Braintree area. Around 8 years ago I started seeing a girl called Helen Beckett. It was through my 5-year relationship with Helen that I first met Darren Nichols, who at this time was having an on-off sort of relationship with Helen's sister Rachel. From that time I became a friend with Darren, and even after I split up with Helen, I carried on associating with him. I would describe Darren as a very accommodating person who would do anything for you, and I think perhaps he was too easily led and could never say no to anyone. I would still go out drinking with Darren. I would estimate that about once a week we would go out to our usual pubs, which would be either the Spread Eagle in Coldnellhurst Avenue and the Tabor Arms in Panfield Lane. Both these pubs are a short walking distance from Darren's house, which is situated right at the junction with Pegasus Road and Bailey Bridge Road. I've been asked by police today if I can recall any such time in December last year when I would have been out socially for a drink with Darren, and he has not been his usual self. I've thought carefully about this, and nothing in particular comes to mind. There have been occasions when he's had a row with his wife Rachel, and he normally tells me about what's happened. He's not really one to keep his problems to himself, and I must admit that he usually talks too much that I tend to switch off. The police who specified the evening of the 6th of December 95, and I cannot be specific with anything that comes to mind in regard to Darren, but I'm sure that if he states we were out drinking that night, then we were, but he does have a better memory than me. Okay, now interestingly there, it appears that there isn't one specific day, one specific evening that Ricky Snell can recall where Darren Nichols was anything really out of the ordinary. According to Darren Nichols' version of events, he claims that after the shootings, he called up his friend Rick to go to the pub and he just drank a severe amount of drink and then went home. Could he have acted in a normal, almost level-headed way after such an event? Bearing in mind he was the unwitting getaway driver by all accounts for the evening of December the 6th. Now, reading from the book Blogs 19, Darren Nichols states the following. All day long I've been dying for a beer, but now all I could think about was drinking half a bottle of whiskey to blot everything out. I suggested we both go for a drink, or 3. At first, Mick agreed, but by now, when we got back to Mark's Tate, he had changed his mind and said it'd be best if we get straight home. I knew my wife and kids were expecting me, but I just couldn't face them. I pulled out my mobile and phoned my mate Rick, told him I'd had a really bad day and asked him to meet me down the pub. He stayed for a couple and we talked about any old bollocks, but then he had to go home to his girlfriend. In the end, I just sat there on my own, sitting in a corner and drinking myself into an absolute stupor. So really, it's up to you at home how you believe Darren Nichols would have behaved during that visit or supposed visit to the pub with Ricky Snell. Would he have been someone who was, I guess, in a state of shock, really? It's probably the best way of describing it. Would he have been disconnected, quiet, or would he have been in a more frantic, hyped up state? Whatever it was, if in fact that pub meeting did actually go ahead on December the 6th with Ricky Snell, it's clearly not something that stuck out in this man's memory. It's not something that he can recall as being anything different or anything out of the ordinary. The following question is from Sam C, and they ask the following. Do you think the police literally had no leads and got desperate for a charge because this was such a huge case? I know there's conspiracy around it being a cop hit, which I probably don't buy into. But conspiracy they had so little evidence to go on, had contaminated the crime scene, and the only option for resolution was Darren Nichols' nonsense allegations. Quite an interesting question there, and really everything gets a little bit blurred when you take a look at how the crime was originally investigated. Now, we're led to believe that 36 hours after the bodies of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were discovered, that Ivan Dibley, the lead investigator, got his first lucky break, the big break, as it were, just 36 hours after the bodies were discovered. That is when Donna Jaggers comes forward and claims that they were meeting a man by the name of Mickey the Pilot that night. But then we have the inconsistencies. The fact that her official statement doesn't actually turn up until 1996. It wasn't given 36 hours after the bodies were discovered. It was given well over a month after these murders. I think it's fairly evident that the police knew that they made mistakes during the investigation stage of this case. The fact that the lead investigator didn't turn up at the earliest opportunity. The fact that we have no time of death. That we have footprints from a press reporter who actually managed to gain access to the crime scene. The fact that it wasn't sealed off correctly. The fact that it was contaminated in as much as the Range Rover was taken away on the low loader, the bodies then repositioned, etc., etc. This was categorically a flawed investigation from the very start. The next question is from Lenny Russell, and he asks the following. What do you make of Nipper Ellis's claims that his father killed all three and Wombs and Steele had no part in it whatsoever? I did actually do a video about this quite a long time ago now. I think that was back on the original channel again. Now, when I first heard this revelation, when I first saw the clip, I guess before I actually saw the full interview, when he said, my dad did it, at first I thought it sounded incredibly genuine. I thought, Christ, maybe this is the truth. But when the story started to unfold, the questions were asked, and really, Steve Nipper Ellis putting the pieces together himself, telling us how that crime was committed, who was involved, how they got them down there and all that sort of stuff. It became evident to me that we weren't looking at the truth here. The reason I know that is because obviously when you spend a lot of time looking into this case, you know what's present, what isn't present, what's most likely, what isn't most likely. But when you have someone who's coming forward trying to put a story across in terms of, okay, this person did it, they've also got to be able to account for a lot of the stuff that people know regarding this case. I'm not the only person that's looked through the statements. Many of you, everyone at home has the same access to what I have access to. So I'm by no means saying that, it didn't get past me, detective crime scene to courtroom or whatever. I'm not saying that. But you have to have a very, very good knowledge of the ins and outs of the case in order to form a plausible story. That's what I'm trying to say. And as I say, it wasn't really until pretty much near the end of the interview when it came to the part where he was discussing how the crime took place, what happened, who was involved, who was in the Range Rover, that I sat back and thought, nah, it just doesn't fit properly. So obviously that's my opinion on that particular theory. And then the other part of your question is the possibility that Mick and Jack had no involvement at all. Now, the only way that I can see, and this is obviously just my own opinion, the only way I can see them having no involvement whatsoever is if the relationship between Nichols and the corrupt officers extended further before the murders, if that makes sense. Now, Darren Nichols claims that he struck up this relationship with DC Bird around Christmas time after the murders had taken place. Now, the only way that I can see them being kind of set up, put in a sort of tricky position in terms of being lured to a certain place for a deal maybe, so that they were there or close by on the evening of December the 6th, is if this was somehow orchestrated by this corrupt officer and Darren Nichols. That's not to say they pulled the trigger, and I think that's the one thing I've always stuck to throughout my videos for the last 3 years. I've never said that they had no involvement whatsoever in the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, but I just don't believe they were the people that pulled the trigger that night.